This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. First of all, starting next week, we're going to move the start time back to 12:30, which is where it typically had been until we started with our 12:35 mincha, pushing us till 1 p.m. So starting next week, we'll go back to 12:30 start time. So this week's parsha is the most cataclysmic event in the history of humankind, which is the Ten Commandments, which is the time where God came down from the heavens and spoke to an entire nation. We've mentioned many times, every religion has its revelation narrative. What is unique about Judaism is that this revelation came from God not to an individual or a group of individuals, but rather it came to the entire nation. And God, at that event, at the Sinai event, gave what we call Aseret HaDibrot. Now, we translate it as 10 commandments. They're not necessarily 10 commandments. They are more correctly Aseret, 10 Dibrot, talkings, speech, sayings, things that were said. It's not 10 mitzvot. And actually, these 10 are a little bit strange, okay? In our Chumashim, well, we have on the chart that everybody has, we have I am Hashem your God, no other gods, not to say God's name in vain, the observance of Shabbat, honoring parents, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, which actually means kidnapping, don't testify falsely, and don't covet.
Rabbi,
Yes.
which one is it? Is it Pekude?
I'm sorry, it's Parshat Yitro, and the Aseret HaDibrot are on page 406. Page 406, where we actually have these Aseret HaDibrot, these 10 commandments. And for all of you who enjoyed Rabbi David Foreman and his wife this past Shabbos, this is primarily taken from Rabbi David Foreman's teachings. Okay? So let me share this with you. So actually, it seems a little bit strange. What are these 10 commandments? Or better, perhaps, we have 613 mitzvot. What are these 10 about? What is unique about these 10? We might want to say, well, these are for all of humanity, but that's not true. How do we know that's not true? Shabbos. Shabbos is not for all mankind. We have Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach. We have the 7 Noahide commandments. Shabbat is for the Jewish people. Shabbat was not given to the world. You might say that these are foundational principles. These are large categories, and the others will align themselves, fill in under these to a certain degree. But if that's the case, it's very, very strange, right? Number 9, don't testify falsely. There is a very general category in the Torah which would encompass this and a lot more. What is that? Mitzvah of the Torah? Midavar sheker tirchak. From any matter of falsehood, you should distance yourself. This is simply one manifestation of falsehood. And there are many manifestations of falsehood. There is this, testifying falsely, there's swearing falsely, there's lying to your friend, right? I mean, there are many manifestations. So if we're looking for major categories, I don't know if these are not really major categories. if you'd say, well, these are the major foundations of Judaism. Well, I think if I would go around now and ask, what do you say are major foundations of Judaism? I think there'll be some others that are on the list, and some of these would not make the list. Yeah, Shabbat, that's up there, right? Belief in God and denial of any other gods, yeah, that's up there. Okay, don't murder, is that a foundational concept of Judaism or of the world? Right? Don't steal. I don't know if that's Judaism, right? When we look at, if I were to ask you, what do you think are the foundational aspects of Judaism that really set us on a different course, a different direction? So Shabbos would be in there. I would say kashrut, right? Kashrut, keeping kosher. That's a major one. That affects so much. Where we can go, where besides where we can eat, where we can't eat, even where we can travel, where we might have difficulty traveling to. I mean, that's when people are going through a conversion process. So of course they need to accept upon themselves all of the mitzvot, but there's a certain basic understanding of the big three, and that would be Shabbat, kashrut, and family purity. I would say those are the big three that of course a person's got to sign themselves up for, right? And take it another step, right? We have one overriding principle that Rabbi Akiva, Hillel told the potential convert when he wanted to know the entire Torah while standing on one foot. What was Hillel's response to him? So interesting. It's a paraphrase of Yahavta l'reacha kamocha, which is love your neighbor like yourself, which Rabbi Akiva said, Zeh klal gadol, this is the big rule of the Torah. Actually, Hillel paraphrased it. Right, what you don't want, right? Madasani lecha lechavrecha lo tavid. That which we often call the golden rule, right? If you don't want someone to do that to you, you shouldn't do that to someone else. We've all told our children myriad times, right? If you don't want something that which is unpleasing, sanui, which you don't want done to you, don't do to someone else. And it's fascinating because we don't find that in the Torah. It's a paraphrase of what Leah had said, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Right? So first of all, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, why isn't that on our list? If we're already going universal with don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, so then why isn't V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, on the list? And where did Hillel get this idea of that which you don't want done to you, don't do to someone else? Where does he say that that's the entire Torah? Everything else is just a subset of that. Go learn and see how that fits in. Where do we see that? Yes, Esther. Okay.
I mean, it seems to me that Sarah wrote are rules for society.
Okay, but again, rules for society would not include Shabbos.
Rules for Jewish society.
Right? So we really do need to sort out what are these 10 about? Why were these the 10 that God presented to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai?
They're all tied to God.
I'm sorry?
They're all tied to God.
They certainly are all tied to God, but so are the other 603. All the mitzvot are tied to God. And we'll soon see that there are, like we've mentioned before, multiple structures over here, right? There's two tablets. We know the joke, right? God said to Moses, I'm going to give you some tablets. Moses said, how much do they cost? He said, they're free. Moses said, I'll take two, right? But why isn't it just one tablet? Probably a little bit easier, right? It wasn't like we have all of them, like these two tablets kind of chiseled out like that. It was two separate tablets, right? Now, you want to distribute the weight more evenly, perhaps, right? But, why are there two tablets? Why are they broken? What is the structure? What is the breakdown? And why are these considered to be? As the Reformant says, most of us will not say, oh, I'm inspired by the Ten Commandments. Oh, the Ten Commandments is what, when I'm going through a downtime, I think of the Ten Commandments, and that's what lifts me up and gets me through. Or if I'm faced with a challenge and I'm about to give in to a temptation that I shouldn't, the thought of the Ten Commandments comes to, that's not what it does. So what are these? Yes, Cheryl.
What I don't understand is that the whole world, well, maybe not the whole world, but it seems like most of the Western world honors these.
Yeah.
But
Right. On many a court, we have the Ten Commandments, even though that was there. I think the constitutionality of that has been challenged in some states. Why should that be? Yeah.
what about the Shabbat, though? I mean, why would that be universally
Correct.
accepted?
And it's not meant to be universally, right? Others have adopted, right? The Muslims have their holy day on Friday, and Christianity has their holy day on Sunday, right? But what are these all about? Yes, Dove. Okay, so Dove, you want to say it's sort of like a marriage contract between us and God that took place at Sinai? Fair enough, but the question then just gets pushed into that direction. And why are these the terms of the ketubah? Right? What determined these? What is the perhaps unifying, aggregating theme that we find here in the Ten Commandments that gives us a cohesive understanding of these seemingly 10 disparate ideas? Dibro. I'm sure there are those that will view it that way, but that's not the direction we're going, though. So let's first look at the 5 and 5. On one tablet, we have 1 through 5. On the second tablet, we have 6 through 10. And many of you have, I'm sure, have heard already this idea that the first 5 are a certain category and the second 5 are a different category. What are those two categories that we're somewhat familiar with? Man and man. Good. The first 5 are between Bein Adam L'Makom, between mankind, humankind, and God. And the second one is Bein Adam L'Chevero, between a person, their friend, humankind to humankind. Which one is problematic? Honor your parents. Number 5 seems to not fit into that structure that is so commonly espoused, right? Number 5, honor your parents, right? It has a certain like Bill Cosby ring to it. I brought you into this world, I can take you out of this world, right? I know he's not quite as popular as he used to be. Okay. but we all grew up with Bill Cosby. Okay, right? So honoring parents seems to be an exception to that rule. Honoring parents is not between us and God. Right? Now, granted, by honoring parents, it's also honoring God, but by all the mitzvot, we're also honoring God. Every bein adam lechaveiro, every mitzvah between us and another person is also between us and God, in that God commanded us to treat one another in a proper fashion. So maybe this categorization is correct, but instead of saying between the first group being between man and God, we could rephrase that somewhat. As the Gemara in Kedushin, the Talmud teaches us, we have three parents. We have our mother, we have our father, and we have God. Right? And each one contributes towards the birth of this child. Right? On a biological level, we understand that the child gets the 23 chromosomes of each gene from the mother, 23 from the father, and that way we are a mixture of the two, of both of our parents. So physically, all of that comes from our parents. However, the breath of life, right? Tragically, you have situations where you have a fully formed physical baby that is not born alive, stillborn. So Hashem is the one who breathes life into each person. So there really are, we could say, three creators that go into each and every one of us. Parents are creators, and Hashem, of course, is the creator, right? Capital letter, capital C. So if we rephrase our groups, and instead of saying between man and God and man, we say between man and his creators, so then we've got a good category. Because parents go into that category of creators. Parents are our creators, not our soul creators. Well, not our SOLE creators, nor our SOUL creators, right? But they are creators of sorts. So therefore, that classic arrangement does hold water. Not between man and God, but between mankind, and humankind, and our creators. And the second one is amongst humankind, amongst ourselves. Don't murder, adultery, stealing, actually meaning kidnapping. We'll get to that soon. Testifying falsely, and lo tachmod, and coveting that which belongs to someone else. Yes, Cheryl.
I was going to say that seems like there are 7 negative, like don't.
Okay.
And 3, yes, you must.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. So Cheryl's making a point that, it can't be that it's split up, wanted to have an even split of do's and don'ts, or the 5 and 5 are do's and don'ts, because it's not, right? It's 7-3. So how are we meant to wrap our heads around this? So the Kli Yakar points out that by having these 5 and 5, it's not a list of 10. There are different ways that we can split this cake, right? We can, as we did over here, split it like this. Split it like this. We can also split it like that. In which case, we actually have 5 sets of 2. And if we will find a common denominator between number 1 and 6 and 2 and 7, 3, 8, 4 and 9, and 5 and 10, then we've opened up a whole different way of looking at this. And instead of it being really aseret hadibrot, it might be 5 concepts which manifests itself, this concept, when it's between humankind and their creator, this is how it looks. And when it's between humankind and one another, this is how it looks. It's the same concept, but it's going to manifest itself differently when I'm dealing with other people than when I'm dealing with God. So let's go to number 2 and 7. That's one that Kli Yakar speaks about, and that is probably the easiest one to see and then to fully understand this concept, and then we'll work on applying it to the other 4 sets. Number 2 is no other gods, what we call idolatry. Number 7 is a similar sounding word, which is don't commit adultery. Right? A married couple need to remain loyal and steadfast to one another without there being any other intrusions into that sacred space, right? And we view that not just in terms of intimacy, sexual, but to maintain those boundaries well before it gets that area. It was funny this morning during class. So Natalie and I, we have the grandkids. So there are a couple of kids are come through here on the way to Olam. They have to say good morning to us over here at the class every morning, right? So Natalie, Natalie was bringing my grandson Noah through, right? So I said, oh, I get to see Noah. Oh, and I get to see the Safta also. What a special treat. And then I turned to the camera, guys were online, and said, by the way, that was my wife, okay? Just for the record, I'm not talking about anyone else. That what a treat that I get to see, right? We have to stay in. I'm sorry? Yes. I don't want anything to be misconstrued, right? So what is the unifying concept, the single concept over here of number 2 and 7, that when it comes to us and God, it is do not worship idolatry, no other gods. And when it comes to humankind, that manifests itself as don't commit adultery. What is that one concept that translates itself differently in each of these, that manifests itself better in each of these situations? Sacred relationships. Sacred relationships. Okay? So we can define number 2, 7, and the area between 2 and 7, those who want to fill in, you have a pen or a pencil, right? Don't betray sacred relationships. Between us and God, there is God. There is God. There is no other. And therefore, if we're going to go anywhere else with our prayers, with our hope, with our trust, so we are betraying that sacred relationship. When it comes to humankind, so we all have many, many relationships. And of course, we are not meant to betray any of those relationships, not a friendship, not a trust, whatever it might be. But certainly the most sacred of the relationships that we have is a marriage, a husband-wife relationship. That is the most sacred of the relationships. And therefore, what we could fill in the middle of number 2 is don't betray sacred relationships. Let's now go to number 1 and number 6. So there we see clearly this idea of it being one single concept that manifests itself in different ways when we're dealing with creators as opposed to when we're dealing with peers. Don't murder. Why would a person murder? Now, obviously, there might be rage involved, but more at its core, why would a person murder? Hatred, okay? Hatred.
Not recognizing that the victim's soul is also from Hashem and B'Tselem Elohim.
Okay, not recognizing that this is a child of God, right? But without getting too spiritual over here, right? When the mafia rubs someone out, why are they rubbing that guy out?
Either money matters or lack of loyalty.
There's always 3 reasons: sex, money, or power.
Okay, that's sex, money, and power. That's what will lead to them saying the world would be better without that person, right? At the core, right? The world will be better, or at least my world, right? Let's say my world, meaning, right? I'm not saying that this person has the good of mankind, right, in mind. But my world or my world view, my view of the world, in my view, the world will be a better place without this person, right? People might knock out the spouse of someone who they're interested in, right? Money, sex, power. I think that basically sums it up. But the underlying principle is the world is better without this person. Now, that's number 6. Number 1. So we can't kill God, right? But what if I feel the world will be better without God? What can I do? Ignore him. I can ignore him. I can deny his existence. The same way that the world, I feel the world better without this person. This person is cramping my style. Well, as a teenager, when I was not all that motivated religiously, I felt that God was cramping my style. And at that point in my life, I would have been thrilled if someone would have given me a convincing proof that God doesn't exist. But try as I did to find it, I was so disappointed every time.
Or even more extreme, such as Hitler said with Jews and giving the conscience. You could go to the other extreme and say this entity is a bad actor, malevolent.
Okay. Yeah.
But even you don't even ignore him.
Yeah. So that's by the people. But by God, I can't kill God, right? But what I can do is I can ignore him. Yes, David.
Except that in the Cain and Abel situation, Cain deserved death, but God didn't give him death. God wouldn't even take his life.
Okay.
He put a curse on him, but he didn't take his life.
Okay. So what we see, so then what is this unifying concept that we'll find in Numbers 1 and 6?
We can ignore.
Sorry?
We can ignore.
Yes. So, but what is the concept? Right? Granted, I can ignore both of them, but there is a unifying concept. You should X, and the opposite of that would be, when it comes to people, murder. When it comes to God, it will be ignoring, denying. respect, but I don't have to respect someone, and therefore, even if I don't respect him, I won't kill him. Oh, yes, yes. So to acknowledge, let's say to recognize, to acknowledge the existence of the other, right? This is a living, existing person. My existence does not overrule theirs, that if they are bothering me, by number 6, if they are bothering me, that I then have the right to remove them from existence. So number 1 would be to acknowledge, to recognize the existence of the other. Murder is the epitome of not recognizing, not acknowledging, not accepting the existence of the other. And I'm going to bring them into a state of non-existence. So the way that we show, that we acknowledge, we recognize the validity and the existence of the other within humankind is we don't murder. And between us and our creator, us and creator or creators will include parents, right? But in this case, it's God, us and creator, right? To accept, not to ignore, not to deny the existence of God.
Rabbi, I think the other point is that at creation, God said, let us make man in our image. So we carry the image of God within us.
Okay.
And to
absolutely in this first one, right? There are those that point out that if I recognize that in every person there is this Tselem Elokim, there is this image of God, or take it a step further, there is this breath of God that we call the soul. So I've got to recognize, that's what Janet was saying before, I got to recognize the godliness in a person, and right, by murdering someone, I am denying that this person is a child of God, that there is this godliness in the person. So what we have over here, again, we're working on the premise that it's not simply 10 dibrot, but there are 5 concepts, 5 fundamental societal concepts, which will manifest itself. There'll be 2 sides to each coin, and one side of the coin is as it relates to us and our creator, and the other is as it relates between one another. So number 1 is to acknowledge, to recognize the existence, the validity of the other. Now, once I've done that, I'm living with other people. I can't just remove at my whim. So then what happens? Relationships are formed. Number 2 then is to not betray, to recognize, acknowledge, validate the relationships, the sacred relationships that we have between us and God, us and Creator, no idolatry. Between us and humankind, to respect the sacred relationships that we are in, that others are in, and to act accordingly. Number 3 is interesting. In the Torah, it says there, on page 408, Lo tisa et shem Hashem Elokecha l'shav. Right? In the English, you shall not take the name of Hashem your God in vain. Tisa actually means what, Steve? To lift up, right? Don't lift God's name in vain. Now, if we look to page 410, where we have don't steal, it's interesting. It is in the very same verse as don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal. From that, the sages understand that this is not talking about stealing someone's wallet or stealing someone's asset. This is specifically something, a stealing for which there is capital punishment. For stealing, normally there is no capital punishment. There is a type of stealing which does carry Torah level capital punishment, and that would be
Stealing a person?
kidnapping. Correct, Janet.
But
Kidnapping is something for which there is capital punishment.
don't we have the precedent from Noach that, or pre-Noach, that all the little incursions and stealing that was below any threshold was what led to more and more corruption?
And therefore what?
And so why,
So you want to give a death penalty for someone stealing a piece of gum?
no, but why are other types of stealing excluded from this?
From a
Maybe
death penalty?
not non-death penalty stealing. Why isn't it an
That-
umbrella thing?
Because that's elsewhere in the Torah. Again, these are not 10 to the exclusion of the other 603. That's delineated very clearly elsewhere in the Torah. But the sages understood that this one is talking about a stealing of a kidnapping. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Kidnapping and saying God's name, lifting up God's name in vain. Now, lifting is a manner of stealing, right? We have the term shoplifting, right? Shoplifting means that you're going there and you are stealing. Okay, so kidnapping is taking another person's body, right? That is the epitome of a lack of respect for that which a person might own. But let's take it further, right? Yes, Leah.
Just a semantic question. I thought lo tisa shevel is don't carry. The set is carry.
To carry or to lift. Yeah. Okay, we're carrying it off, so to speak. Okay? I can carry away a person, and I'm carrying away God's name in vain. Our body, right? If I say my it's almost like my body is not me. I talk about my body. So there's a my, and then there's the my, and this is the body that belongs to me. So what is the body to me? I own it, right? It carries me, right? The way Rabbi Foreman puts it very beautifully, I think, is it's the expression of myself in this world. How do I present myself in this world? Right? Express it through my writing, through my things like that. But how do I present myself in this world? This is my body. This is how I present myself. Like it or not, right? I could do the best I can with it, but this is what it is. And we try to make ourselves presentable. We should dress nicely, presentably, respectably, right? Be clean, etc., etc. The body is the expression of myself in this world.
But that's mandated by Hashem.
Yes,
I mean,
yes. I get to work with what I got. That's my genes, my DNA. Correct, correct. But the body is, right? So kidnapping, in a way, is don't take away that which belongs, that which presents another person. You have to respect who, what the other person is, who, what the other person has. Right? And I can steal your objects, but the greatest stealing is taking you. That shows zero respect. Right? If I break into your house and I decide, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want that, that is a tremendous lack of respect for that which you have. If I take you, that is the greatest lack of respect for who and what you are. I can't kidnap God. How does God present himself in this world? And that, he argues, is through his name. That is how God presents. Granted, we see a beautiful sunset, that's an expression of God, right? But what I can deny that that's God crafted, but what can I lift? What can I carry? What can I do to show a lack of respect, a lack of boundaries for that which belongs to God? So that would be by my reckless, just loose usage of God's name, where we make a blessing. You have to be very careful. What blessing am I supposed to make? Right? To make the blessing, to make it in the proper way. Otherwise, we call that a bracha levatala, a blessing in vain. That's considered saying God's name in vain. Yes?
So Rabbi, if God's name, you're stealing it in a sense, is that also under the don't steal? I mean, if you lashon hara against a person, or would that be
Okay, so
something
let's wait on that.
else? Okay.
Right now, at this point, we're going to get to that in a moment. Okay? We'll see how Lashon Hara will fit in. Right? Lashon Hara is speaking badly, speaking derogatorily about someone else. Okay? So number 3, the way we could describe that is don't violate the belongings of others. Don't violate the self-expression of another person, right? Safeguard, right? Recognize the belongings, the self-expression of someone else. The Talmud tells a story of a person, a great sage, who was traveling back from studying, and he had reached a very high level of study, but he needed to be humbled. So the Talmud, according to the commentators, Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi, appeared to this person in the guise of an incredibly ugly, almost disgusting looking person. And this sage, hard to believe it, said, wow, I've never seen anybody that looks quite like you. And this person, according to commentators again, Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi, said to him, well, why don't you go and tell the artisan that made me that he really messed up on this production? And that hit him like a sledgehammer, and he started to beg forgiveness. Right? Every person Our body is an expression of who we are. Of course, as we said, it comes from God, but that is the expression. So kidnapping, don't lift, carry God's name in vain. Don't steal, meaning don't kidnap, is to respect, acknowledge the belongings of the other, the self-expression of the other.
Does it also include intellectual property?
Yeah, that which belongs to the other. Let's go to number 4 and number 9. Shabbat. Remember the Sabbath day, guard the Sabbath day to make it holy. And number 9 is don't testify falsely. So it's very interesting. We've discussed this a number of times. In Judaism, we don't just, I believe. We do our beliefs. What belief do we do with Shabbat? We do our belief in God as a creator. God molded, shaped the world to fit it according to his whims and his wants during the first 6 days of creation. Comes the 7th day, God stopped molding, shaping, altering that world. He stopped creating, so to speak. So on the 7th day, we do our belief in God as a creator by stopping to mold, shape, alter this world to fit our needs. And those are the molding, creating of the malachot of Shabbos. It's not a day of rest. It's a lot more restful for me. I'm 1.1 miles from the shul. Be more restful for me to get into the car and drive here in 5 minutes than it is to walk the 1 mile. It's not a matter of rest. It's a matter of not molding, altering, changing this world and using my technological prowess to control this world to stop doing these acts of creation. So Shabbos is our testimony. It is our testimony that God created the world. So that, and then a breach of Shabbos is giving false testimony. It's as if I'm testifying that God did not create this world. So directly, beautifully aligned with that is don't give false testimony about someone else. So not only must I safeguard their belongings, there's something that is a lot more intangible that a person has, and that is their name, their reputation. And I can destroy a person by destroying their reputation in a much more profound way than I can hurt them in a physical, monetary manner. So number 4 and number 9 would be not to violate, but to safeguard the person's, the other's reputation, whether it's God's reputation manifested by Shabbat, or whether it is a person's reputation manifested by your giving false testimony. So we're having these circles that are moving further and further out in terms of our recognizing, acknowledging, validating, not betraying, not violating the person's sacred relationships, the person's things, the person's name. Then we come to a fascinating one. The kicker. Number 5 and number 10. Number 5 is honoring your parents. Number 10 is not to covet. Take a look at how the Torah kind of obsesses on that one. Page 412. Lo tachmod, right? We kind of had 2 words. Lo tirtzach, don't murder. Lo tinaf, don't adultery. Lo tignov, don't steal or don't kidnap. Right? Lo tanev reacha et shaker, that needed to be 5 words. We need to explain what it was that you should not speak false testimony against. Number 10 could have been lo tachmod, don't desire. Well, we have to say, right? So say lo tachmod. Well, let's read what it says. Lo tachmod, do not covet beit re'echa, your friend's house. Lo tachmod eshet re'echa, your friend's spouse. Avdo, male servant. Amato, female servant. Shoro, ox. Chamaro, donkey. V'chol asher l're'echa, all that which is to your friend. How could we have condensed this and had the same message? Lo tachmod kol asher l're'echa. Don't covet that which belongs to your fellow. Why are we obsessing over here with each of these things of your friend? Honoring parents. Let's say a person feels, my parents were terrible. My parents were abusive. My parents didn't take good care of me. My parents screwed me up. All the therapy that I have to go through now, tens of thousands of dollars of therapy, is because of my parents. So why should I honor my parents? So let's go back. Why would the Torah be obsessing over here? House, spouse, servant, maidservant, ox, donkey, right? You want his car? Just go to the dealer. Get the car. Right? If you can't afford it, get it. Right? Why are we obsessing over here? If I want this person's house, I want this person's spouse, I want this person's servants, I want this person's possessions, I want this person's car. What do I really want?
You don't want to be yourself. You want to be that person.
I want their life. I want their life, right? Haman, when Achashverosh said to him, what should we do for a person to whom the king wants to honor? What does he suggest? Basically, a re-coronation of the king. Take the king's garments that he wore when he was coronated and the king's horse that he, right? And put it onto, he was thinking himself, right? He wants to simply substitute. He doesn't want his life. He wants the king's life. You know, very often you hear someone say, oh, I wish I had my kid's life, right? I'm taking good care of them, right? Right? Yeah, right? So what the person wants is someone else's life. Honoring parents, no matter what, no matter how horrific one's parents might have been, there is something valuable that they did. You better recognize and realize there's something valuable that they did. Because if there's nothing valuable that they did, then you're not ascribing any value to yourself. So we always have to honor parents because dishonoring parents is, in a certain degree, not granting any validity to oneself.
It doesn't completely resonate. You could find yourself so valuable that your parents' behavior, if they sexually abused you, or that couple in Riverside who kept them locked on the beds and they were underdeveloped, and
I'm not saying that every
that
person
behavior is so unacceptable
that I'm not going to deal with this parent anymore. Okay? But even such a parent has done something of value. And that is they brought you into the world. Right? We always have to recognize, not put them on a pedestal, not, right? Look, they might be poison, right? And therefore I must stay away from them. I don't want them to poison my children. That's all valid decisions that a person might have to make depending on the extent of the situation, of the relationship. Granted. But at the core, honoring parents, there is this idea of recognizing my own value. Number 5 would be to recognize, validate. Don't violate, don't negate your own value, your own existence. When it comes to mankind, don't covet, right? Don't want to have someone else's life. Live your life. Be the best you that you can be, because no one else can ever do that. No one else can ever be you. So make sure that you are the best you, right? They can do they, you got to do you, right? And you may do better. You like their Tesla? If that works for you and you can afford it, get yourself a Tesla. Do you. Don't do someone else. Recognize, validate, don't violate your own existence, your own worth. And when it comes to creators, that then goes into honoring parents because they've done something of immeasurable value. No matter how horrific they might be, they might have been, they might continue to be, they've done something of value. They brought you into this world. So now we have these seemingly ever widening circles, but then it comes back to ourself. So I started with recognizing the existence of the other, and then validating not betraying relationships, validating not violating expressions of self, belongings, validating not violating reputation. But at the core, in order to recognize the existence of the other and thereby not validate all that which belongs to the other, at the core, what must I have? An appreciation, recognizing the value of myself.
It does seem then that Shabbat 4 and 5 have some twinning, even though it's not the statement and the opposite, because Shabbat is acknowledging creation and
Yes.
at its root, and then parents are acknowledging. So it seems like there might be some
Yes.
other.
All of these are acknowledging. All of these are all about acknowledging.
But I mean, there might be some parallel.
Yes, I hear that, Janet. So with this structure, all of a sudden we see that these 10 commandments are all about respecting the space of the other and being able to live in a spiritual, physical world that is healthy, that is rooted and that does not violate anyone else. Coming back now to Hillel. What was Hillel's golden rule? That which you don't want done to you, don't do to someone else. All of a sudden, sorry, Foreman says, perhaps Hillel looked at these 10 commandments, looked at the structure, and understood that this, what we heard at Mount Sinai, is, which was, we call getting the Torah, but of course it was not the Torah that we read from. That was written by Moses, dictated by God over the 40 years that we were in the desert afterwards. But this is the very essence of Torah. This was the very essence of Sinai. And this is the very essence towards living a healthy spiritual life. Yes, Dove.
Also, some warning that there's a slippery slope going the other way.
Yes, absolutely. That there is a slippery slope if we go off in the wrong direction. Absolutely. Okay, my friends, good. We'll call it over here. And a special thanks once again to our David Foreman and his wife for not just speaking this past Shabbos, but for the material that that I was able to share with you today, which came from him. Okay, my friends, good. Kathy, good seeing you. David, is that David Hardoon? I'm not sure which David it is, but welcome. And Ateret, so good to have you with us. So good to have you with us, Ateret. Feel well. Ateret, you can see us. Ateret, we don't see you, but you can see the people who are here, Ateret. People who will think about you, miss you, and hope for your continued strength and vigor. Okay. Amen.
Smith. Couldn't. I was muted.
Hi, is that David Hardoon or David
No,
Winkle?
David Smith. Smith. David
Thank you,
Smith.
Ateret. I'm sorry, David?
David Smith. Noah's dad.
David Smith.
You
All
got it.
right, good.
Yeah. All right.
Very
Thank
good.
you. That was
Good to have
very
you with
nice.
us, David. Good.
Thank you. Take care. Okay. Bye.
Be well.
Be well.
No, because
That's the danger of